Quite a few different stories to highlight within the world of Nintendo news today, starting with some comments from President Shintaro Furukawa himself around the game key card situation, the reason that they are a thing this generation, and that they're probably not going anywhere, and that will probably not make many people happy online, especially those who are physical collectors. But nonetheless, this remains a hot button issue for this generation, and I want to break down kind of the reasoning behind some of this and how third-party publishers and developers are likely intertwined in this decision. Then we also have a Switch 2 stock update with some direct comments from Furukawa around shortages, mainly in the Japanese market, but no doubt if you are trying to find this thing right now, it's hard to find anywhere in the world. Restocks are happening, but they don't seem to stay in stock for long, and we have to talk about how long that may be the case. We also have a brand new and first announced GameCube edition to the Nintendo Switch Online GameCube lineup of games. Unfortunately, you don't have to wait long for it, as it will be out the middle of next week. Mario Kart fans are mad, and rightfully so. One of their big workarounds to be able to play traditional versus races with the 3-lap repeating experience in a regular course has now been seemingly taken away. And I want to highlight what's changed, but also really how this is just a feature missing and Nintendo's kind of patching the way it worked before. And hopefully it's not gone for good, but we'll break that down. And finally, we have an interesting rumor around Sakurai and his negotiation with Nintendo around potentially making another Smash Bros, but wanting to do Kirby Air Riders first, and it could actually spell a longer wait time for the next Smash Bros game in the current generation, so we have to get on the same page with that. So we'll break down all of this info, but before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick this off right over at Go Nintendo, where you can see their article written up following the 85th annual meeting of the shareholders, where there was a full Q&A section with Nintendo, and there were some specific questions asked around the game keycard situation that we are seeing unfold in the Switch 2 generation, and President Shintaro Furukawa's exact comments behind them. And some of this is done by translations online right now, people who are listening in on the call. We will get an official Q&A script later on, but you should be able to get the general idea of exactly what's being said here. So you have Nintendo president says the company worked with third parties on game key cards, explained the impetus for their creation, what a card, and you have during the 85th annual general meeting of the shareholders, Nintendo president Shintaro Furukawa was asked about the impetus for game key cards on Switch 2, and his response echoed insider information from a couple weeks back. The online vitriol for game key cards have been present since their announcement, and it seems to have only grown louder with the system's launch. While the online chatter makes it seem like game key cards are an option that no consumers would touch, the jury's still out on just how unpopular they may be at retail. Still, the online fervor led to the medium being discussed by Nintendo's president. According to Furukawa, game key cards came about on Switch 2 for a variety of reasons. First off, game file sizes on Switch 2 are larger than that of Switch titles, which at least partially led to the conception of game key cards. This goes hand in hand with Nintendo working with third parties to give them a solution for bringing these bigger games to retail. This path forward was worked on alongside third parties as a viable option. Nintendo's president pledged to continue working with third parties to help them sell their titles on Switch 2, and that includes a physical route. Specifics on what may or may not change going forward were not shared. You might remember at the start of the month that Naoko Kino of Kiosko Consultancy Agency, what a name, which offers support services to developers, had some insight to share on the publisher side of things. According to Kino, while gamers might not be smiling about game keycards, publishers are applauding the move. Specifically, Naoko said that more expensive games along with cartridges that just contain a code to download data may not make gamers happy, but software publishers are thanking Nintendo as they face rising costs to make games. Furukawa's comments above seem to dovetail with Kino's comments quite well. And so the idea here being from Furukawa's basically stance on this, saying that, hey, third parties, we're working with them to have a solution to bring their games in a physical retail packaging still for this generation, because obviously if it were up to all of the publishers and even Nintendo themselves, they would have been digital a long time ago. It's more profitable for them. You look at the game cost, it's the same if you pick up physical or digital. $80 for Mario Kart World either way, whether it's digital or physical, but clearly there is cost on Nintendo's behalf that goes into producing Mario Kart World, the casing, the cartridge that is 64 gigabytes, mind you, and shipping that around the world to physical retail locations, and the shelf space from retailers that they still have to take a cut of that profit at the end of the day. So yes, hosting it on Nintendo's own store and Nintendo taking their cut, and that's the only cut that comes out of it, even for third parties, is far more profitable for these companies, and that's the direction they want to see this go. However, they are very aware that gamers who have grown up lifelong collectors like myself, we still prefer a physical option at the end of the day, and this was the medium point, a game key card where yes, you have to insert a cartridge to download a server file to get the game on the console, but then you can still technically eject that cartridge, resell it. That's definitely the value of game key cards. However, you are still taking up internal memory on your system, and the bigger thing for longevity of these games, if you just care about being able to boot up a game 20 years from now without any worries of the server still being intact or not, you do have to worry about that situation with the game key card, unfortunately. And it seems like this is Nintendo really trying to just put a low-cost option out for these third-party devs. Nintendo themselves, from a first-party perspective, are all committed so far to releasing their first-party content on a physical cartridge of 64 gigabytes or more. Now, Furukawa was saying file sizes are bigger, and that's a big reason for game key cards. They probably don't want to go higher than a 64 gigabyte cartridge in the Switch 2 generation, and some games from a third-party perspective will no doubt need that. You look at games like Call of Duty and the file size of some of those post updates now, and 100 gigs, 200 gigs upwards is not actually out of the realm of possibility. And while it may be somewhat more optimized on a Switch 2 version, having around 100 gigabyte Call of Duty file, if you have all of the campaign, multiplayer, and Warzone and all different stuff installed, you're going to potentially have really big file sizes. And yes, from that perspective, I do think the game key card makes sense in those situations that you're going to have to do large downloads anyway, with massive updates that continue to hit those games to keep them relevant. However, the issue becomes when you have these games that are 8, 10, 12, 16, 15 gigabytes in that range, and you have Switch 1 versions of these games in some cases coming out on a physical cartridge. Everything's on the cartridge. But on the Switch 2 edition of that same game, it's a game key card, because it does seem like, while this is not proven, that Nintendo likely has only produced the 64 gigabyte cartridge. Maybe they have a 16 gigabyte one as well, and we just haven't seen any of those games come to light yet. But any cartridge that has been opened and verified so far that is a full on-game experience where the contents of the game are on a cartridge have been a 64 gigabyte cartridge so far, and there has been that rumor going around that that's the only size available, and that it's likely upwards of $16 to $17 of the actual cost to the publisher for that cartridge. So there's been some movement from smaller publishers online chiming in on this, saying like, hey, gamers want it on the cartridge, work with us to get that done. But it remains to be seen if that can really be done economically for these businesses at the end of the day. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of game key cards this generation. We're going to see those one-off games that don't hit game key card and they're all on cartridge, and that's going to probably be celebrated in the collector community and stuff, and physical collector community. But I do think for the most part, third-party games on Switch 2, get used to seeing that game key card banner, which also just makes the box art look terrible because it's literally like a solid white banner along the bottom. So unfortunate times if you're not a fan of the game key card. I definitely am not. I'm picking up game key card games mainly digitally this generation, unless if it's really a game I want to have the case for my collection. And everything first party Nintendo that's on cartridge, or big third party games that are complete on cartridge, I will still pick up physically. But let me know in the comments on this one how you think Nintendo will continue to navigate this game key card situation, and whether or not you think President Furukawa's comments about it really being a solution for third parties primarily is indeed what brought the game key card forward this generation, or if you think that's something that Nintendo's kind of slowly just shifting the market to more of the idea of a digital first mindset. So from here we have Nintendo president apologize for Switch 2 shortages, because yes, while we do have ample stock for Switch 2 at a launch of a console compared to most other console launches, it is still very hard to find this thing. And you can see this article from My Nintendo News, which outlines the Nintendo Switch 2 has been proven to be a highly sought after device, especially in Japan, so much so that Nintendo President Shintaro Furukawa has apologized for the stock situation in the land of the rising sun. Furukawa says, that more and more stores will be selling the product once supply meets demand, and says that they are making every effort to supply retailers with Nintendo Switch 2 consoles. Here's what he said via DeepL translation, which says, "Currently there is more demand than supply for Switch 2 in many countries, and we are not able to meet it. We understand that some of our shareholders have not been able to obtain the product. We have accepted lottery sales on the My Nintendo store since April. The number of applicants far exceeded our expectations. Since then, we have held 4 lottery sales, but some did not win. I announced that the 5th lottery would be held in July. As for general mass retailers, many of them also sold by lottery. Gradually, more and more stores are selling the products in their stores. We will make every effort to supply the production system so that as many units as possible can be delivered. We apologize for any inconvenience caused by this initial demand, which was much higher than expected." So wouldn't you know it, Nintendo being on the heels of a vastly successful console generation in the Nintendo Switch 1 with 150 million units strong, a lot of people were ready to upgrade. And this is a very, record-breaking console situation. We have not seen a console sell this fast in terms of total units ever. It smashed all of the records in terms of the actual launch window. So while Nintendo really did live up to their promise of trying to do everything they could to prevent scalping largely, because if you were around, just for recent console launches, PS5, Xbox Series X, and then even the Switch and PS4 and stuff before that, you know that at launch, this always happens. You cannot satisfy the entire market all at once. It's just impossible to do. And you see that, unfortunate, when it's just not even close to enough supply, those double, triple prices sometimes online. We've talked about it in prior videos, but fortunately, it seems like scalpers are not faring that well with the Switch 2. They're barely profitable, 50, 60 bucks profitable in some case, which for the work per console that it takes to actually go get the system and try to scalp it online and all of that, if your take home is anything below 50 bucks, it's just not going to be a high scalped item. And while there are inflated prices out there, it doesn't seem like you really need to pay those. If you really just look around and try to follow restock accounts online, they are happening frequently enough that you do have a good shot at securing one at a regular retail price. And that's obviously good news for everybody. But Furukawa, even with their ramped up production for Switch 2, it's still getting blown out of the water, especially in Japan. One, they have a cheaper version of that console over there that's region specific. 2, Nintendo just owns the Japanese market, and they are highly successful over there currently. And honestly, they just can't keep up with how many people want this thing right now. And hopefully in coming months, as we kind of see a lull before the holiday season, it's easier to find for a while with store restocks. And then once you get into the holiday season, I think we're going to be right back to this situation of every stock drop sells out immediately, and you have to kind of be hunting for it constantly. Okay, good news story from here. We have our first official GameCube edition coming to Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. You have Mario & Co. hit the pitch in 5-on-5 matches in Super Mario Strikers, coming to Nintendo GameCube, Nintendo Classics on Nintendo Switch 2 for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack members on July 3rd. So you don't have to wait too much longer to play this one. This will be out next week. And what's cool about how Nintendo does these updates for NSO is they go off of Japan time. So while July 3rd is Thursday, I am expecting this game to actually hit the service roughly is Central Time, which is where I am at, 8 p.m. that evening on July 2nd. Because it'll actually be going live in the morning on Japan, which will be in July 3rd. So basically, look for it Wednesday evening if you're excited to play this game. It's really cool to think about GameCube games being added into the service because they are quite a bit more content heavy than even what N64 games are in general. And listen, for Mario Strikers, I'm more excited for this one than Battle League, which released on the Switch. I was excited for that game initially, and it was pretty light on content, and I really just have a lot of nostalgia for this game and really enjoy the mechanics of how it works. So we may make a separate dedicated video kind of diving into that game and seeing what it looks and runs like on the Switch 2, but we are now in the official update cadence of maybe once per month. We have to wait and see, but this will be a July game, and it's at the beginning of the month, whereas, of course, the first games were front-loaded right at launch with Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, and Soul Calibur 2, and now we have this one just 1 month later. So if we get something in early August as another GameCube game, I'm thinking that's kind of going to set a loose precedent of a once per month update roadmap schedule. And that's pretty much what we saw them do with N64 when that initial games library started getting updated for a while. Then it kind of got more spotty, missed months altogether. Then we had sometimes multiple games in the same month. So we'll see how Nintendo does with GameCube game updates from here. Moving along from here, we do have the newest Mario Kart World update, which has a lot of people online talking about this ruining the game for them. And listen, I have not hopped into this specific mode online very much myself at all. I've primarily played Knockout Tour online, but I definitely do understand if you are a fan of traditional versus races and you want to have that 3-lap repeating experience to be able to essentially master shortcuts and continue to race the same players around the same track multiple times, this is going to be frustrating for you. And you can see the write-up here. Latest Mario Kart World update now includes intermission races when selecting a random course online. And you have Mario Kart World has been updated to version 1.1.2 on Nintendo Switch 2. This update patches out a few known issues, but more notably has removed the feature that has become a staple of online competitive play since launch. Before the update, when selecting random during course selection while playing it online, it would always result in a traditional 3-lap race. Now, after version 1.1.2, the controversial intermission courses, where the majority of the laps are driving from one track to another, are a possibility when selecting random. And you could actually see it's in their official patch notes. So adjusted courses selected in random when selecting next course in a wireless versus race. And then you have, fix some issues. But basically, the long and short of it is Nintendo actually intended this to be a part of the random course selection. But up to this point in time, if you selected random, you were guaranteed to get a traditional 3-lap course and not an intermission course, where that, and just for the intermission courses, in case you're unfamiliar, is when you're driving from one course to the next in an all connected race, like something like Knockout Tour. Those are essentially eliminated if you select random, which a lot of people did competitively online. You would see multiple different screen captures of people going online and everybody selects random. That way you at least know you're getting a 3-lap course, a traditional course to race against other players online. Well, that's essentially been fixed now because that wasn't intended from Nintendo. And the big thing to me is that it's pretty obvious that they just need to add that in as an option standalone. You shouldn't even have to pick random for that to be an option on the table. You should just be able to select a traditional courses version of online play, and one that also includes intermission, or maybe you can turn that toggle includes intermission or not off or on in your settings, and then you leave it up to the users on what kind of course they want to race on. And I think that the more options, the better in the situation, and the less options, not good. So obviously, rightfully so, if people, especially from a competitive scene, were really into the 3-course races, and now you can't do that anymore, and there's not an easy way to select those, Nintendo needs to patch this with a new update that just adds in the traditional course selection as an option for online play. More options is better, less options is not. This did seem to be a bug and something Nintendo didn't initially plan to be how the courses were selected, and that's them fixing this, but they really shouldn't have done it whenever there's literally a vast majority, it seems like, of the online community that was enjoying that mode. Now it's not a thing, and we're gonna have to wait and see when or if they choose to go back and add this in as an option, and I certainly hope they do in a future update. But I'm sure they're seeing the feedback online, continue to make it a known thing on their radar online if it's something you want to see changed in the game. And I expect the roadmap of Mario Kart World content to be a long one, considering it's the launch game for Switch 2 and we're right at the start of a fresh generation with a juggernaut seller on Nintendo's hands here. So we'll have to wait and see what happens for the long term for Mario Kart World fans. From there, you have this following rumor, which gives us maybe some insight to the development of the next Smash Bros. And at the bare minimum, a passion project of Sakurai's that was maybe a negotiation deal for him to do the next Smash Bros. As you can see this write-up over on Go Nintendo, where it says, rumor Kirby Air Riders is a passion project for Sakurai, told Nintendo he would develop a new Smash Bros. After. Smash 6 might still be a ways away, and you have here Masahiro Sakurai, creator of both Kirby and Super Smash Bros., apparently negotiated with Nintendo to develop Kirby Air Riders before working on a new Smash Bros. Game, according to Reese Kiwi Talks Riley, a game developer interviewer who recently dabbled into posting rumors and alleged insider information on Twitter/X. With consistent Smash development lasting for nearly a decade, starting 2012 with Smash for Wii U and 3DS and ending in 2021 with DLC for Smash Ultimate, Sakurai was understandably experiencing burnout. he agreed to continue working on the acclaimed platform fighting series if he first got to develop Kirby Air Riders, which was a passion project for the Tokyo-based developer. Kirby Air Riders, a sequel to Kirby Air Ride 2003 for the GameCube, launches exclusively for Nintendo Switch 2 in 2025. So the cool thing is that we do actually know that Sakurai was working on this game for a couple years already. The entire time we were watching that YouTube channel of his with all the new uploads, we found out in his last video that those were all pre-recorded and that he was working on a top secret project he couldn't talk about at the end of that, closing YouTube video on his channel. And it does seem like it was at that time of filming, at least a couple years into development. We know it's a 2025 title, so it's kicking off the Switch 2 generation, but that could mean that the Smash development for this generation is barely in pre-production and planning phases right now and not necessarily under full development, which means it may actually be a later generation game than something that is earlier on. At which point, if that is the case, I do hope we see some kind of notable update, maybe even a Switch 2 edition of Smash Bros. Ultimate, something to give fans a reason to hop in back to that on the Switch 2, maybe just to check out the 4K, better visuals, HDR, more stable frame rate, stuff like that, give it some enhancements, do something for the Smash community in the meantime while we're waiting on the next game to be cooked up by Masahiro Sakurai. But I do think you just let this man take his time with the franchise and figure out where you go from here from Smash Ultimate and how you elevate the series even further, because clearly that kind of set a new bar and standard of what's possible in a Smash Bros. Game. So we'll have to wait and see just how long we end up waiting for the next Smash Bros. Game. But if this rumor is to be believed, it could be quite a ways away from here for the Switch 2. But I'm definitely going to be here for it day one when we do see it launch, and I would expect some kind of lengthy DLC roadmap for it to come after its initial launch too. So we could be talking years and years into the future for new Smash content on Switch 2. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of all the different stories we talked about today. How do you feel about the game keycard situation following President Shintaro Furukawa's most recent comments? Are you able to find a Switch 2 if you are currently on the hunt for one? Are you excited for Super Mario Strikers to be making it to the GameCube Switch Online? What do you think of the Mario Kart World update? And what do you hope we see from the next Smash Bros? And how far off do you think it might actually be in the Switch 2 generation? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.